A very controversial Baltimore Ravens decision was revealed in a stunning report, essentially grounding the players, and they are being ripped for it. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on this midweek edition of the show, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We're 5 days a week plus more here on Locked On Ravens with daily Ravens content and coverage. And we have a jam-packed episode today. There was a huge report of anonymous Ravens players and people around the Ravens on the Baltimore Sun that was released a few days ago. And there was a lot in there. We talked about it on yesterday's show. Well, one of those decisions that was in there, we talked about it briefly on yesterday's show, it's gotten a lot of controversy and a lot of attention, and we're going to talk about that. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about an offensive line benching, picking up steam. We'll see if it will happen or not, but the idea of it certainly seems to be picking up. And then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about Zay Flowers apologizing, taking accountability, and a lot more surrounding this Ravens team. So again, thank you for being here today. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Let's just get right into it here. A bombshell article by the Baltimore Sun being put out on Monday, and plenty in there. We talked about it again on yesterday's show. Anonymous players ripping into some of the coaches, talking about the roster, giving us examples of why the season has gone the way it is, including the Buffalo game and what impact that had. So if you missed out on the full summarization that we did yesterday of the article, be sure you check out yesterday's show, and be sure you check out the article at the Baltimore Sun as well. It was incredible work done by the Baltimore Sun. But there was one decision in there that the Ravens coaching staff made that is getting a lot of attention right now, and that is essentially that the Ravens players have been grounded by the coaching staff and essentially punished by the coaching staff. And I think it's a wrong move. I think it's bad optics. And look, honestly, I'm not sure if the Ravens expected that decision to get out or, get the attention that it's getting. But long story short, and again, this article from Brian Wacker, Josh Tolentino, Sam Cohn, and Sam Jane of the Baltimore Sun. Well, in the locker room, they ended up removing practically everything that the Ravens, like to have fun doing. They have basketball hoop in there, ping pong tables, cornhole boards, video game consoles, all that is gone. The Ravens removed it, and this happened. A lot of outlets are reporting it as they removed it in response to the 1-5 start. That's not true. In the article, it clearly states that this happened after the Chiefs game in week 4, and they still lost 2 games. But the thing is, multiple players told the Baltimore Sun, this coming from the article, the decision came from the coaching staff who wanted to strip away distractions and have the team fully locked in amid its disappointing start. It's not the first time they've done this. In previous seasons, when the Ravens stumbled early, coaches leaned on similar tactics, dialing back locker room freedoms in an effort to boost focus and reset the work environment. Again, diving into this on yesterday's show and just kind of my initial reaction there, I was just kind of like, what are we doing here? And then seeing all the steam that it picked up yesterday is that continued to get a lot. There was a bunch of people who were commenting on it, a lot of people who were saying, like, what is this team doing? And it really got even more attention than I thought it would. I mean, it became a pretty national storyline in terms of the league. And, the article continuing here, I'll read it out again. From a player's perspective, the recreational activities helped break up long days and allowed the locker room to breathe and relax, even for a moment, from an atmosphere that demands intense daily focus. Since the removal of the activities, the Ravens have lost 2 more games, extending their season-long losing streak to 4. The fun stuff is gone. The team is still searching for answers. I need to ask a question here because I really did only briefly touch on it on the show yesterday and kind of wanted to dive into it more today. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? And honestly, how did we get here? This removing the stuff from the locker room and the fun stuff from the locker room, why is this an important issue for the Ravens? And honestly, in my opinion, like, it's not the right thing to do because it does promote team camaraderie, promotes good relationships within the locker room. And it essentially, the players just now want to show up for work and then leave. And that's it. Like, man, I hate coming into work. I don't want to go into work today. Like, you're locked in. I don't think that a round of a video game or, a game of ping pong is the reason these Ravens are losing right now. I joked about it yesterday. I'm like, oh, look, we figured it out. It's ping pong. Look, No, it's not ping pong. It's not any of that stuff. I don't think that, a game of cornhole is distracting players from, locking in on their goals here. I get it's been a tough start to the year. I get the team is grasping at straws, but these are numbers that actually do matter. These are things that actually do matter, not ping pong, not any of that. You want to know stats that matter and things that do matter? The Ravens right now defensively, they're the worst team in the league in terms of giving up points. 194 points in 6 games for the Ravens. That's crazy. They're 30th in the league in total yards given up on defense. They're 30th in the league in passing touchdowns given up. They're 30th in the league in rushing touchdowns given up. Their numbers got a little bit better from that Rams game in terms of yards per attempt, both passing and rushing. They're 24th in terms of net yards per attempt passing and 21st in terms of net yards per attempt rushing. But you know what else matters? The team can't generate pressure. The team can't get sacks. The team is barely forcing any turnovers whatsoever. And on top of that, you have to wonder about some of the injury situations. That's stuff that matters too. Different stuff that you have to worry about there. You also have to wonder about the coaching staff and some of the play calls. That stuff matters. The Ravens have gotten a little better as a blitzing team in terms of actually doing it. But, there's still question marks as to the play calling. That's stuff that matters. This locker room stuff does not matter. That's the stuff that they need to be focused on. And you know what? The article, I think, put it pretty nicely, where that stuff does break up a pretty grueling season that is very stressful. And, now you take that stuff out of there and it could have the opposite impact that they want. I mean, clearly it did. The Ravens followed up and lost that next game to Houston by 1 billion points. So it didn't really have the effect that they wanted. And I don't think that, we need to be sitting here talking about it, but this is who this Ravens team has become. And it's been an unfortunate year-long spiral for them in terms of being caught up in some of these meaningless, drama-filled conversations or situations, whether it be player-oriented with guys like Deontay Johnson or Eddie Jackson or Marcus Williams. If you want to throw CJ Gardner-Johnson in there, you can. Or, situations like this one and this getting out, when an article with anonymous players, and a lot of them apparently, the Sun spoke to apparently over 25 sources within and around the Ravens organization and people who are, plugged in and involved. When something like that comes out, it's not going great. Stuff like that usually doesn't come out unless things are going pretty poor. So, it's tough because, for what the Ravens have right now and what they are showing on the field, this just makes, it makes no sense to me. I mean, I think it can only have a negative impact, in my opinion. The only quote unquote positive the team feels like it can have is, hey, guys aren't going to get distracted, but I don't really feel like that's happening anyway. And a former NFL quarterback in Kurt Benkert, he weighed in on this and he said, quote, "That's one way to lose a locker room. If you think downtime activities are a problem, you've got to zoom out and look at yourself in the mirror as coaches." And again, it's kind of like blame shifting, right? Where, we heard in this article, like I mentioned earlier and yesterday, that players not happy with some of the situations Todd Monken is putting the offensive players in and the scheme and whatnot. That to me is a bigger issue, much bigger issue than any of this. But it feels like, again, it's kind of like, oh, what can we blame as opposed to ourselves or potentially just John Harbaugh? Because I think Todd Monken does take accountability. I think Zach Orr does take accountability. But, when we're talking about the Ravens coaching staff, I believe this decision, I don't know, but I would guess this decision came from the top with John Harbaugh. And it's, to me, is an attempt to grasp at straws and figure things out. But this, when you're trying to avoid distractions by taking stuff out, you have created a bigger distraction. And I'm sure over the course of the week, it's possible that John Harbaugh is asked about this, that players are asked about this. I'm not sure. I don't know if they'll be asked about it or not, or any of the stuff in the article that came out. But it now has become a huge story and something that the Ravens wanted to cut out distractions. Instead, you got yourself a pretty big one. So the Ravens get grounded by the coaching staff, didn't have the effect that they wanted it to. And here we are now talking about a 1-5 football team that needs to win in week number 8 in the absolute worst way. So again, in my opinion, locker room stuff being taken out, that stuff doesn't matter. What matters are the stats I read out, are some of the problems that they have that we talked about, that we're going to continue to talk about here on this show. One of those problems is the offensive line. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about a popular offensive line benching among the fan base, picking up some steam here potentially. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It's frustrating. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Gametime, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games as low as $100 in the app. Made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. And I love zone deals too. You pick the section, Gametime picks the seats, and you save big. And honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking Ravens football as we do each and every single day here on Locked On Ravens. We have the regular Locked On Ravens show here Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also have a lot of other stuff. We have bonus episodes on the weekends when the headlines permit, and there are a lot of headlines during the season. We also have the Locked On Ravens watch-alongs, which you can watch along the games with me live. We react to every single play. Those have been really fun to do. Wish we had better results, but it's really fun interacting with everybody on those. We also have instant reaction shows after the games, as well as after every single piece of Ravens big news. We have Locked On Ravens Squad show with myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. Those are twice per week, Wednesday, so we'll have that tonight for you at 7:30 Eastern time, as well as after games on Sunday. So much coverage and content here of the Baltimore Ravens every single day. Be sure, again, you hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for that 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. The offensive line has been a huge topic of conversation for this Ravens team for the entire year. Honestly, even before that, right? We've talked about them during the preseason, during training camp, and one position on that line everybody has just not been able to stop talking about, and for good reason, is right guard and Daniel Faalele. It's been rough. It's been a struggle for him to fully come into his own at that position consistently. And, it's been tough to kind of watch how he hurts the Ravens in a lot of different ways. And, really has struggled to, particularly in run blocking, find his way. And I want to make it clear before we talk about this year in particular, and, every year it's a team sport, right? Football's a team sport. This is not, the offensive line struggles are not just Daniel Faalele's fault. Is Daniel Faalele a big contributor in them? Sure, absolutely. But, we can't sit here and act like Angie Voorhees has been incredible this season. He hasn't. He played better against the Rams, but it's been a struggle for Voorhees. Ronnie Stanley has regressed and been injured. It's been tough for Ronnie. Roger Rosengarten has regressed. Tyler Linderbaum has had his moments, but, he's playing next to two guys that are struggling, and that's going to impact his performance as well. So the offensive line has been just a group struggle this season. But the Ravens did this to themselves. We've talked about that. If you've been with me for a while on Lock the Ravens, or even if you just popped in recently, I mean, we've talked about it for a little bit or a while, both, where the Ravens, they didn't address the guard position the way that they needed to, and they are now dealing with what they have given themselves, which is inexperienced players that aren't contributing, and they don't have a lot of options to replace them. But you kind of need to. Bull Smolka, we talked about these stats last week. He put these out. He talked about the 6 games the Ravens have played, the PFF positional rankings for the Ravens offensive linemen. I know some people like PFF, but other people don't, but this just adds context. Ronnie Stanley right now is 24th among tackles. Andrew Voorhees is 40th among guards. Tyler Linderbaum is 4th among centers. Daniel Faalele, 45th among guards, and Roger Rosengarten, 38th among tackles. So again, it's a group sport here, group offensive line effort, not in a good way, unfortunately. But Faalele's been an issue, and it seems to be picking up steam. The fact that the Ravens could make a change or multiple changes on their offensive line. John Harbaugh obviously added some fuel to that fire last week after the game against the Rams, where he talked about how everything's going to be on the table in regard to the offensive line. We had a show on that last week. Jess Rebeck, who obviously is very plugged in with the team over at The Athletic, he was asked a mailbag question last week about the fact that, Harbaugh said everything's on the table, but it seems like some players like Faalele are Harbaugh guys. And the question that was asked was, do you get the sense they will be looking to make any changes along the offensive line? And Jess Rebeck said, quote, "I do get that sense. I know Harbaugh said he was considering O-line changes before week 6 and nothing changed, but it wasn't hard to detect the frustration in his comments after Sunday's game about that goal line sequence. And again, during his comments Monday, heading into week 6, I would have probably told you that I thought Faalele was playing better than Andrew Voorhees. However, if Voorhees was much better against the Los Angeles Rams, I'd be moderately surprised if Ben Cleveland and or Corey Bullock weren't given a shot to start after the bye." So, you see Harbaugh's comments, you see some of the stats, you see, people speculating, hey, this could maybe be a thing here based off of frustration. Like, it seems like we're slowly getting to the point. And look, I think they have to be at that point. They should have been at that point a little while ago. In fact, maybe a lot of while ago. But, they need to do something. You can't just keep doing this over and over. My favorite saying, and I'll use it here, or at least one of my favorite sayings, and I use it a lot. That's why is, what's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? And I know that there's context within that, and with what's going on with this team and just in general with how it's used, but I think it applies here where you continue to trot out Daniel Faalele, who has shown you that consistently he'll have moments like everybody else does. Everybody has moments, but consistently he cannot protect for Lamar Jackson. He cannot run block and open up holes for Derrick Henry on a consistent enough basis that a contender that, came into the year with Super Bowl aspirations needs. And I've said it a billion times. I don't care if you're Lamar Jackson. I don't care if you're Derrick Henry. You cannot do anything if your guys up front cannot block for it. You can break 3 tackles. Well, guess what? There are 5 more guys waiting for you if a play is busted like we've seen for this Ravens team. So, look, do the Ravens have these world-class options to replace Faalele? No. They're guys who are inexperienced. You'd have to take a chance. I mean, Ben Cleveland does have some level of experience, but honestly, and I've talked about this a lot, I just don't see Ben Cleveland playing for this team. Now, I could be wrong there, but John Harbaugh clearly has an issue with him. It's been very apparent in public, and I still don't know why he's on the team. But that's something I don't think John Harbaugh wants. I think that, like the question, I believe it was from Stephen J, who asked the question to Jeff over at The Athletic, Daniel Faalele is a John Harbaugh guy. And this goes both ways. We talk about the John Harbaugh doghouse all the time. When you are in John Harbaugh's doghouse, it is very hard to get out. Look at Ben Cleveland, for example. But when you are one of John Harbaugh's guys, it takes a lot for you to lose your role, to lose your starting job, to lose your snaps. It takes a lot. And you can say that's the same with any coach. Coaches have their favorites and guys who you're like, why is this guy playing over that guy? And we know that the Ravens organization, loyalty is a key word in their vocabulary, sometimes too key of a word. We've talked about how loyalty is usually a good thing, right? It's helped the Ravens out a lot, but sometimes they can be over loyal and too loyal, and that actively hurts them. So, look, if you're not going to make a change in a coach here, like Zach Orr's defensive coordinator or somebody else, and you're not going to make any other big sweeping changes like that, you do have to do something, in my opinion, because you can't just continue trotting out this team the way that it looks right now. And I get it, right? Injuries have played a factor, but I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm using it as context where, yeah, guess what? Cooper Rush can't do the same stuff as Lamar Jackson. That was another blunder and something I talked about during the offseason where I said, hey, I don't mind the Ravens spending money on a backup quarterback. I think that's the right thing to do. But as the offseason went on, I was kind of wondering, and I've talked about this with other guests on the show and whatnot. We're just kind of like, well, wait, where Lamar and Cooper Rush are two very different players. And we saw when Tyler Huntley came in, who can do more of what Lamar does in terms of him being able to put stress on a defense the way that Cooper Rush just can't. That's the type of quarterback the Ravens need. I think, guys like Carson Wentz would have been perfect, or Gardner Minshew, or some of those guys who were just more mobile than Cooper Rush. Obviously, Tyler Huntley, some of those other guys as well. Like those guys with that skill set would have worked. And I get the Cooper Rush showed it in Dallas, and this is kind of getting off topic a little bit, but my point is that, Cooper Rush can't mask offensive line play the way that Lamar Jackson can. Cooper Rush can't prop up offensive linemen and make them look better than maybe they are, like Lamar Jackson can. That's one of Lamar Jackson's best traits, is he elevates. Lamar Jackson is the ultimate elevator. And when that guy gets taken out of the lineup, all of a sudden your mistakes are a lot more magnified because Lamar Jackson can work with those mistakes and turn them into positives almost sometimes. Cooper Rush and other guys, they can't do that. So I think for the Ravens, they do need to make a move here. I'm willing to give Andrew Voorhees another week because of his game against the Rams, which was, as many people have noted, a vast improvement. The tackle spots, you really have no other options, and I think your best options are Ronnie Stanley and Roger Rosengarten, despite how both have played and unfortunately how Ronnie's been injured. Joe Noteboom, they should honestly cut Joe Noteboom, and I know that's pretty harsh, but he has been absolutely awful for them. But the problem is, who are you going to replace him with? You need to build up a team during the offseason, and while it felt like Eric DeCosta did that, as we talked about during the offseason here on the show, there were a couple of glaring holes, the guard position being one, depth of the offensive line being another. I said over and over and over again, Patrick McCary is not walking through that door. And Patrick McCary masked a lot of the depth issues because he himself could play all five positions. You know how valuable it'd be right now to have Patrick McCary? And I'm not even just talking about plugging him in for Daniel Faalele. I'm talking about being able to put him at any of those five positions on the line and feel pretty good about it because, he wasn't like overly spectacular at one position, but he was pretty good at all five. So, you lose someone like that and you don't really replace it, and your depth is inexperienced. Like we talked about that. The Ravens now have to deal with what they have built during the offseason. A roster that I thought, again, was the best in football. I said that, and, I'll say that I said that. Like I said it. It's out there on the internet. I mean, it's out there if you want to look at it. But I did say that, look, for as good as this roster looks on paper, if stuff goes wrong at guard or the offensive line depth or a couple other positions we talked about, it could get a little ugly. And lo and behold, worst case scenario happened. Now you have to do what you can to make the worst case scenario as good as you can. And I think part of that is just trying stuff out because, look, can it really get any worse than it already has been so far? Like if you try something out, and I'm not even talking offensive line. I mean, I am, but I'm just talking in general. If it's other positions too, like positions that are struggling. If you try something out and it doesn't work, is that any worse than what we've seen? But if it does work, hey, you found something. It's kind of like what we saw last year with the defense, where it was just awful every single week. And then, they finally said, all right, we're going to try to move guys around. Or Darius comes in, Kyle, we're changing your roll up. Like it's a last gasp effort. And it worked. That's what they have to do now. You have to try it. And if it fails, it fails. And your season's probably over. It might already be over. I don't know. But you at least have to try something. Try something different. See if it works. Because what's working now is nothing. It's not working on the offensive line or in a lot of other areas as well. Getting Lamar back would help. But you as the Ravens, if you are the Ravens, you owe it to Lamar to put the best five out there to protect him. And right now, I do not believe the Ravens are doing that. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk a little bit about Zay Flowers and his apology for what transpired after the Los Angeles Rams game in the locker room. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
And the show was brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. For the Ravens, they need a win. They need to beat the Bears in Week 8. They would fall to 1-6 without it. And right now, over on FanDuel, the Ravens are 6.5-point home favorites against the Bears. So maybe you like the Bears as the road underdog, you like the Ravens as the home favorite. Well, either way, you have to head over to FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking Ravens football as we do 5 days a week plus more here on the show. Be sure to tell a friend and tell a family member that we have them covered, just like we have you covered over here on Locked On Ravens. If they want the Daily Ravens perspective on something or just Daily Ravens coverage, we have them covered. And be sure you also hit the like and subscribe button in both video form and audio form. It's the same show, both video and audio. You can follow me over on social media at KOstreicher34 on Twitter, Instagram, as well as TikTok. Now, before we get into the Zay Flowers apology and him apologizing, I want to play a clip from a show that Qadri Ismail, former Ravens receiver, and I had last week. Usually Q was on Wednesdays. He couldn't make it this week here for the main show, but Q and I talked last week, and we had a conversation about the offensive line, and I want to play this clip from Q because, Lamar Jackson, the offensive line, it all goes hand in hand, and Q made a pretty interesting analogy on what those two actually mean for each other, particularly Lamar Jackson. That's where it all is. It's up front. That's where it starts for a team. And right now, even with Lamar Jackson coming back, the big question is, can those guys protect Lamar and block Lamar and let him go do his thing, or is it going to be more of the same coming out of the bye?
It's not about having him put on his Superman cape every single play. That's my point. There are times where he should be able to pick and choose when to put on his cape. If you can't protect, or if he's like sitting there frantic, why have to put on your Superman cape when you're confronted with kryptonite every single play?
I think Q's point is, for Lamar, he shouldn't have to be asked to mask offensive line play the way that he has, and I get it. Like Lamar, he's a guy that is going to, with his star power and, the expectations that he has just as a player, he's going to be asked to do a lot of, hey, make this guy better, make that guy better. But every single play, it feels like Q talked about, where he has to put on that Superman cape and the kryptonite, feels like it's on his own team, which is the crazy part about it. So like we talked about in the second part of the show, they definitely need to figure out what's going on there and probably make a change. And we'll see how that progresses throughout the week. And if there was a chance to make something happen and make a change, it should be during the bye week when you have an opportunity to kind of get things right. You're not preparing for an opponent. They should have made it during the bye week. We'll see if they actually did anything there, though. Zay Flowers, he made a lot of headlines after the Rams game for skipping out of the locker room before media got in there, skipping media, quote unquote availability when it comes to just talking and giving answers after the game. And he obviously had 2 huge fumbles and didn't have anything to say about it because he wasn't there. And that got a lot of flack, got a lot of controversy, talked about it. And so he apologized for it. And I think it was really cool to kind of see him take accountability for it, said it wouldn't happen again, which, look, I think is a big thing to do. I get it. Look, Zay is a young player. He was frustrated after, contributing to a loss like that, I'm sure. And it's not just Zay who has done this. Roquan Smith, who is much more of a veteran player and is looked at as one of the leaders of this team, he has done it after every single loss. And that, to me, is unacceptable, at least the ones that he's available. Obviously, injured players don't usually speak to the media, but, when he was healthy, he was skipping out on this. So I think that, when he took accountability for this, Zay, he did it before anybody asked questions. He said, quote, "Before you start, I wanted to say that I apologize for leaving early. I respect your jobs and I respect what you all do, so it won't happen again. I appreciate you all. I'm ready to go." And again, I think for this whole players skipping media or not talking to the media, again, it should be up to them when they're not required to do it, whether they do or don't. There's a lot of other conversations to be had about player availability with media. Should they be required to talk? This, that, and the other. But, it's about just being available and I guess taking responsibility for whether it's mistakes like Zay made or poor play, if you're the leader of the defense, like Roquan is supposed to be, taking accountability for that or going up there and answering questions. And again, Zay's just going to go up there and say, oh, it's a tough situation. Yeah, that's probably what he would say, nothing too crazy or anything like that. But I think for a lot of people, the problem that they have is that these veterans leaving, again, I'm not trying to single out Zay. Other players have been doing it too. It's all not good. But one, it's a reflection of leadership. I've talked about that for a while. I think it's a reflection on the coaching staff, a reflection on John Harbaugh as well. But it's also about leaving the younger players to answer for them, right? We've seen Teddy Buchanan have to answer for them. We've seen Malaki Starks have to answer for them. Keon Martin and other undrafted players have had to answer. Even veterans who don't have as big of a role on the team have had to answer. John Jenkins, for example. So it's been a tough look for the Ravens this season in a lot of different ways. It's very uncharacteristic of them, I would say, based off of the reputation that they have had over the course of their franchise history. It's all just kind of man, where's this Ravens team that we've known? Who's this version of this team? And that is in terms of on-field play, in terms of off the field, in terms of everything going on right now. So again, I give a lot of credit to Zay for apologizing, taking accountability, and you can tell Zay loves playing this game, loves the city of Baltimore. And, I think it probably was just frustration. I probably didn't mean anything by it. I think it was probably just frustration. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure you hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens content and coverage coming up. We'll have the Locked On Ravens squad show for you tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time with myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Qadri Ismail. Plus, we'll be back here tomorrow with another edition of the main show here on Locked On Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.